Hi guys, today is a really cool day. The weather is beautiful and we've got these two cars here, the McLaren 650S Spider and also Tety Tudor, a supermodel who's currently away in Dubai, has lent me her 458 Spider. So we've got the two cars to do a bit of a driving impressions head to head. I've already shown you around them, talked about the specs and explained why we've got these two rather than the Speciale or the 12C or any other options. So check that out to get a little bit of backstory, but for now I'm going to jump on in and take them out for a drive. So first off, we're in the Ferrari 458 Spider. It's named the 458, it's got a 4.5 litre V8, naturally aspirated. This is my first time properly driving one of these, so it's actually quite exciting. I've been out in a 458 before, but getting to know it a little bit more, spend a few more hours behind the wheel, get to experience exactly what's going on. So we're running in the completely normal settings at the moment. So the Manettino switch here starts off in sport mode. We've got suspension quite firm and the gearbox is automatic. The very first thing I want to draw attention to is this bumpy road mode button, as it's called, which when you press, the suspension gets immediately smoother. That makes such a big difference on these British roads. You almost want it to start in that setting, but I don't think it does that. The Manettino here, you can go through wet mode at one extreme. Obviously, if the conditions were a little bit slippy, you would engage that. Sport we're in now. Race, if I turn it up one, you'll hear more of the valves, more noises going on. It's a little bit firmer, a little bit more aggressive, probably how you want it. Then you get into the traction off settings and we're not going to be playing around with that. By going into race, it's actually come out of bumpy mode, so let's get that going again because you never really ever want to be without that. Now obviously this is quite sensible, I suppose, right now. No noises, the valves aren't doing very much. The valves flutter open and closed all the time, so there are all sorts of different noises going on depending how you're driving. If I press the auto button, obviously we'll now be using the paddles, which are really nice paddles. They stick out quite a long way and they're quite long and tall, so easy to press. This is where we can drop down through a load of gears, get some more revs, and then put the foot down. And that's what this car is famed for. It does sound really quite good. On the open roads, it sounds great. When you're in town, the valves sort of open, close, open, close, open, close. So unless you're on the move, you're getting some really weird noises out of the car. My initial experience is that it really does feel really firm, even with the bumpy road settings. There's a lot of being bumped around and feeling lots of jolts. So that's down to our roads. I'd say the car generally, this is probably what makes it this more emotion that all of the drivers, the road testers and journalists talk about, is probably down to how it's not quite refined. I mean, it's a lot more refined than the generations before, the 430, the 360 and so on. But it's a lot less refined from my experiences so far than the McLaren is. And you can immediately feel that. It's quite cool being in here. The interior is really, really nice. I love this sort of space through here. I love the look, the Ferrari style is pretty nice all round. Gearbox, quite jolty. I suppose expect that. It has less variety of range to it than the McLaren does. But it's a pretty good place in terms of visibility. You can see quite a lot around. The buttresses behind us don't get too much in the way. And the wing mirrors allow us to see quite a lot outside as well, the door mirrors I should say. But I do like the noise, everyone likes the noise. Although I have to say, hearing the two together and revving them earlier in the other piece, I'm not sure it's that much better than you initially think it is. Certainly at slow speeds you get more whoosh and sort of turbo noise and fun going on from the McLaren, obviously. Turbos aren't in this car. So it'll be interesting to see both what the 488 GTB sounds like when that is on the road, Ferrari's twin turbo take, and also the McLaren 675 LT with the new titanium exhaust system. But just driving through here, you know, quite slow, we're not even going 30 miles an hour. With bumpy road on, every bump is quite major. Now I'm going to experience a narrow gap, fortunately not too bad. Something I do really like in this car is all of the options you've got on the two screens. You have a control panel here to do the left screen, and a control panel on the right side, don't know if you can see that, to do all the stuff on the right screen. The left is all all of your things, like if I go to the main menu, car setup, display screens, let's bring up status, we've got the speedometer, we've got the temperature gauges, we've got pressure gauges, we've got all sorts of different things, tyre pressures. Anyway, now national speed limit, let's go. It's quite cool. I can imagine on the track, and this is what it's going to come down to, for the very experienced drivers, this is a little bit more exciting because it's more raw, but most people, probably 99% of us, don't go out and drive these cars like that. So it's much more interesting to compare the real world sort of side of it. I'm shifting early so I don't end up at silly speeds. You do notice the car is less torquey than the McLaren, it's 100 pound-foot less. It's quite a significant difference, and the 80 horsepower as well. Oh yeah, back to the screen, sorry, the right screen at the moment, I've got the navigation display up. You can change that also to radio, media, phone, standard kind of stuff. Let's keep the nav up though. So no displays for the passenger to look at, but you could argue they don't really need one, so why not? And obviously this car has a bright yellow rev counter in the centre, which is very nice. Little bit more gently here, I'm going to put it in automatic mode, and this is where I find the car is a little bit two-sided to its character, because on the one hand you have the exhaust valves which are almost silent in this mode, but on the other hand it's still really quite firm. The ride is really bumpy. I've said it quite a few times, that's all what I'm used to because the McLaren has such clever hydraulic suspension setups. I think the seats, they're not bad, but they're a little bit snug for me. I find it digs in a little bit low on the back, and there are Daytona sport seats you can get in this car as well, just like you can get the bucket seats in the McLaren. But it's kind of interesting driving this car, and I'm rather looking forward now to trying the McLaren again, to sort of do that direct head-to-head, experience one, then experience the other straight after. So let's try and find somewhere to pull over, and then swap around. Okay, so we're back in the McLaren, the 650S Spider, named unsurprisingly 650S because it has 650 PS, S for the fact that it's part of the Super Series, McLaren's new naming system. So 641 brake horsepower, that's about 80 more than the Ferrari has. It also has about 100 pounds-foot of torque more, around 500 in this car. And the car itself, because we're in the carbon fibre tub, is a little bit lighter as well. So pen and paper tells you that this car is going to be a little bit quicker, and it noticeably is, especially on the torque front. You can just feel it propelling you forwards. But just like with the Ferrari, kicking off here with everything in the full automatic mode, we've got a much smaller steering wheel. I said it before, I think, but it's modelled off Lewis Hamilton's Formula 1 wheel, so that's quite cool. A lot of the car sort of goes over to that F1 style technology, which is really, really nice when you know all about it. I'm sure you could, like, some people could talk for days about all the tech. I just sort of know some of the basics. But similarly to Ferrari's Manettino, we have the active dynamics panel here that you engage, and then you have the different settings you can use. So the left side, handling and suspension, the right side, gearbox and powertrain. So I've got them both in sport and sport settings at the moment, because that's probably the good sort of mix, but also straight onto the manual gearbox settings. If you put aero mode on, the rear wing raises up, which gives you a little bit more downforce at the back, so you directly feel some of the aero taking part there, especially if you're pushing on the track or something. If you push it up into track, you'll get a little bit louder in here because there's a thing called intake sound generator, which allows some sound through the backboard. There are some valves, so it is real noise, not made up noise, which is what a lot of people, I think, initially assume. And it makes it a little bit louder in the cabin. With both of these cars, you can actually put down their rear windows and hear a whole lot of noise if you're driving with the roof up. Now, in this car, the paddles, it's a rocker system, so they're connected all the way through. If you push away from you, it will go down or up on the opposite side. So you can completely manipulate it. If you're doing something or pressing a button, you can use your other hand, push through with your thumb, or pull back, or push away, or pull the paddle, and it then feels that you're ready to make a shift, and it means when you do eventually do it, it's a much quicker shift, and it's almost immediate, completely cutting that time down when it was already pretty fast, and it makes it even quicker. So that's a pretty cool feature, again, Formula 1 style right there. Another couple of things you've got brake steer, so if you're turning around a corner really quite hard, it will brake on the inside rear wheel. Interesting side effect of that though is that you get through rear brake pads quicker than front brake pads, which is unusual for cars, of course. Normally it's the front. I'm going to put down the rear wing so it slightly obscures rear visibility, and I'm not pushing on hard enough at the moment necessarily to need it. So, like the Ferrari, we've got a series of different displays. McLaren have the more traditional navigation type system in the centre that does all your sort of usual kind of modes in there, and then save the driving stuff to up at the top here, so you have fuel levels and things on the right, and you can set a sort of multitude of different options on the left screen to do with tyre temperatures and things if you go through this panel here. And that's also where you do the lift system and that kind of stuff. So if I just go through the different options, we've got this one called vehicle info, and here we've got things like the tyre pressures. I don't know how much of that you can actually see from the camera angle, but lots of different settings. So if you're driving around the track, you can configure it how you want it to be. So the thing you're immediately aware of when you get into this car is how much softer the ride is. You hear more noise, that's because we're in the carbon fibre tub, so more of it sort of carries directly through. If you've ever heard videos from any carbon fibre tub car, it's always the way. But the actual bumps themselves are significantly softer because of the hydraulic suspension setup that the McLaren has. And I would go as far as saying the gearbox is significantly smoother as well. The Ferrari has quite a lot of probably intentional generated kick to give it that sort of sense of excitement maybe, but the McLaren, especially when we were driving through London and right now driving through towns, is a much more docile car at this extreme. When you dial it up, especially when you turn that into track, the DSC goes into a sort of sportier mode, so we're not running on full traction, so you have to be really quite careful with that, and the ride gets much firmer, so I pretty much don't use that mode, save it for track opportunities and that sort of experience, but even then it's probably worth keeping it on just to be a bit safer. The powertrain side of things, gearbox gets noticeably quicker. If you're in automatic, not in manual, there's quite a dramatic difference it makes through the different settings. I'm just going to put this back to home so you can play around with it a lot. I think we want to keep it in manual. This car is really fast. I mean, there's no question 458 is quick, but the 650S is different leagues of quick. And I think from my experience so far, you know, noise inside is a very different noise. And here I'd say you have a lot more volume coming out of the McLaren, but the noise is maybe more gruff, more powerful, rather than more acoustic. Also have the sort of turbo spooling and whooshes and stuff going on, which I absolutely love. Presumably the new 488 is going to do something quite similar. I think from a handling and driving point of view, you know, those of us who aren't using these cars at 10/10ths, I'm not sure what difference there is. They both are completely accurate on the road. Similar sort of feel of the car. I think you can see slightly more in the Ferrari if you're looking rearward. The buttresses in this car are quite large, but looking forwards I think there's more visibility in here because the windscreen is a bit closer to our face driving, so you've got more forwards visibility as a result. But they are really quite much of a muchness, just different. Of course the McLaren's a bit faster. You'd probably still argue the Ferrari sounds a little bit nicer, but less so than I actually originally thought. I'm quite surprising myself with that. When it comes to comfort in the cabin, you feel slightly more enclosed here because we're inside this tub. It means we're sat more centrally, so the cabin's quite a bit smaller, and obviously right up on the front windscreen as well. The seats in the McLaren I think are just absolutely brilliant. I love them. Right, sorry about that, we had to pull over to discuss directions and work out where we were going. I think I was in the middle of talking about the seats. The McLaren seats are brilliant. These are the standard seats, great for long distance drives, track use, sporty country lane drives, whatever you need them to do. There's definitely no lack of emotion in here. With either car on the seats point of view, with the Ferrari you'd have the Daytona seats, with this car you'd have the bucket seats if you were going to do a lot of track use, that kind of thing. They're both pretty good even with the standard seats, to be honest. 458 is definitely not a bad thing. When it comes to the suspension on this car, it's an interesting one actually, because it's been heavily refined from the 12C before it. This car is a lot softer than the 458. The 12C was even softer, but this has been made, I think it's 27% stiffer, and in the process been refined, so it gives a sort of almost effect that you hear less noises through from the road, you feel less of the smaller bumps. But if you do hit a big bump, obviously it's quite a jolt. It's going to be with any of these cars because they're pretty stiff setups. I think it's the emotion thing that I'm trying to get my head around, and the fact that the journalists, I suppose it's a funny term, people always write that the Ferrari has so much more emotion, but I think that can only be because they haven't taken one of these out and driven it properly, because noise levels are pretty similar. It's a different kind of noise completely. Really bright sun in front of me there. But this is a pretty exciting car to drive, take my word for it. And when you put your foot down somewhere open, it's phenomenal. The performance is absolutely breathtaking. And it just leaves the 458 for dead in that respect. It'll be interesting to see how well the 488 new one stacks up against it. The light is quickly going down on us, but what a fantastic opportunity to experience two of the very best open-top supercars on the same day. So a big thanks to Tety for allowing me to take out her 458 Spider. You can check out her Facebook and Instagram links in the description below. I'll pop them in, go have a look. But it's certainly been a very interesting one. I obviously preferred the 650S, that's why I bought a 650S for myself. But I was a little bit nervous before driving the 458 this morning that I might come away thinking that was perhaps the one I should have had, but I'm going to be completely honest, definitely not for me. The 650S, I love the newness, the exciting how bespoke everything is. It's significantly quicker. It's obviously a British company. Factory is about 20 miles away from where I live. And personally, it's the looks of the 650S for me. The noise of the 458, there is no question, it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But then again, I think against that, the 650S has enough excitement from the sound. They fixed everything that people didn't perhaps like so much in the 12C. But there we go, you know, ultimately, they're both brilliant, brilliant cars. Anybody who buys either one is going to be pretty happy with their choice. Ferrari, you get the prancing horse badge. A car that's just not quite as quick, not quite as well necessarily held together, put together, not put together, that's the wrong term. It's the way they feel when you're really sort of pushing on. The McLaren just feels like it has much less sort of shake going on. You're more in control of where you are, and I think that's probably down to the handling that comes out of the carbon tub, but definitely something you experience and feel. So it's been a pretty wonderful day. I've loved driving the two cars back to back. I feel relieved that, well, happy that in my mind the 650S is the car for me. There's no doubt anybody who drives a 458 Spider, it's a fantastic machine. And it will be enjoyed very, very much. So I hope you enjoyed looking and being told a little bit about what it's like as a sort of normalish person going out in these cars, having a drive and offering some sort of first feedback and guide as to what they do. So once again, big thanks to Tety. Make sure you go follow her on her different platforms, and I will catch up with you again very soon. Cheers! Take a little bit of a look around them right now and talk a bit about them.